Welcome to In Studio. I'm Jay Daniels. We're pleased to bring you an interview with saxophonist and educator Alexa Tarantino. She's performed with a number of popular ensembles, including Sherrie Maricle and the DIVA Jazz Orchestra. Earlier this summer, Alexa released the album Winds of Change. And as she continues her transition from a side person to a leader, this album showcases some of her advanced skill and technique as a saxophonist. Alexa begins the conversation with some of her memories of her childhood in Connecticut.
So I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. My parents are not musicians, so I did not grow up in like your typical musical family. But my parents just kind of coincidentally settled in West Hartford, which happens to have an excellent public school jazz programs.
Sure.
And so I think I was in the third grade when they took me to see the high school performances that they would put on with big guest artists like Curtis Fuller and Phil Woods and amazing people. And I remember seeing one of the young female students at the time playing a ballad on the alto saxophone, and that woman her name's Erica von Kleist, and she ended up coming through the city and working with everybody, and she's doing her own thing out west now, but that was really what started it for me. And so I just tugged on my mom's jacket and said, that's what I want to do, and so we never looked back.
So was there any other musical stylings that you listened to outside of jazz? I mean, when you were growing up, what were some of the things that you heard that had an impact upon you?
Well, growing up, I mean, my mom would play sort of like, I guess, R&B, like the Temptations or Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder, Motown, like that. So that's the kind of stuff that we would kind of do the dishes to and kind of party after dinner and whatever. So I loved that type of stuff. And that's what we would be singing along to. But my mom also has really fond memories of her mother putting on Ella Fitzgerald on the weekends, when they were, doing chores around the house or whatever. So my parents had a love for jazz, but they didn't necessarily, know about it.
Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned that moment when you heard the alto saxophone being performed and you said, this is what I want to play. Mm-hmm. How old were you when that happened?
I must have been 8 or 9.
So you're pretty young then.
Yeah, I must have been, I think, at 3rd grade, and then you pick up the instrument maybe in 4th grade.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky. I just kind of knew right from there that I really wanted to do it. And then as I progressed into elementary and middle school, when I was transitioning to high school, that's when I was like, I'm going to do this for real, for professional.
Now, did you play in ensembles then at school?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, I had a jazz band like in 4th grade at my elementary school. They started us really young, so I was really lucky to have incredible music educators. They all, we've had some full circle moments later on, as I've gotten to know them and spend more time with them, but they trained me using methods, learning by ear and solfege and things like that really helped me to develop the skills that I use every day. So I got very lucky with a strong foundation. And
I'm still trying to learn the hand signs for,
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with solfege. I didn't have a typical music education in school. I had private piano lessons, and it was note and by ear. But we didn't know what do, re, mi was, and so when I went to college, it was all brand new. And so you're in, middle school, you're in high school. And some kids, they know exactly what they want to do for a career. They're like, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a pilot. And you knew that you wanted to learn saxophone. But were you thinking of it as a career, or was there something else that you had in mind at the time?
Well, my dad is a doctor, and so I always thought, maybe I would be a doctor. But and I always, the courses that I took in school, I was always taking the honors courses, the advanced courses. I really, enjoyed being a good student. But then, at a certain point in high school, I think when it came time to think about colleges, I just thought, I'm not gonna take any more math and science. I'm only gonna take music. So like for the last couple of years in high school, I think 8 of my 9 classes were music related, or some type of independent study. So it was, definitely in high school that I knew I was gonna do it for real, and I was able to kind of craft my own sort of pre-college education in my high school.
So you obviously did not stop at high school, and you decided to take jazz quite seriously, not just as one who did it on the side while you did another full-time job, but you've gone to Eastman for your bachelor's, and that's in jazz performance and music education. And you've also been to Juilliard, and you possess a master's degree in jazz studies. So there has been some discussion as of late, because jazz was not always a part of a school curriculum.
Right.
It wasn't always something that you said, okay, I'm going to get a bachelor's in jazz studies. So what is it that you were hoping to gain? And what did you gain from those experiences in college?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of us wish we could have come up in sort of the old school apprentice style of jazz education. But just with the way that things have changed now, to get any type of teaching position at a school, you do need to have some type of degree.
Sure.
And so I did actually know, at that point that at applying to colleges, that I wanted to eventually teach somewhere. It might not be full-time, but somewhere.
Whether as an adjunct or full-time.
Yeah, or just something. I love teaching. I always loved it, and I love giving back after having excellent music education myself. So that was always something I said, I'm gonna get degrees. But I think what's important is going to school kind of gives you time to develop your music and your learning in sort of like a little bit of a bubble, and that's where you can make mistakes and grow. And I think it's different than if you were just out on the bandstand and doing that, where, I mean, in the old days, the stories that we hear about, people like Bird on sessions getting a cymbal thrown at him, like those are some of our iconic stories. But nowadays,
you haven't had a cymbal thrown at you.
no, yeah. But like nowadays, if you really screw up on the bandstand, you probably won't get called back. You know what I mean? So I feel like school allows for people to really kind of get things together, and you're in such an intensive environment learning from hopefully some of the best people in the field, and you're also doing all of this with this student body that is going to be they're going to be your colleagues for life. So I think it really helps to develop deep relationships, musical and personal. But the thing to be aware of is obviously that, jazz started as an oral tradition, and so learning as much about the history and learning things as tech-free as possible. I always encourage that.
Yeah.
No as little books or apps or whatever, trying to learn things straight from the records, I think is the most important. So as long as people can kind of balance that and not get too in the whole method ideology or curriculum ideology, I think that's a good bet.
And one of the things that you mentioned that you had to do during your time at university was being able to develop your own voice. Now, you're an instrumentalist, but still I think that wording applies to your work as a saxophonist, being able to develop your own voice. So what were the challenges that you faced while you tried to find how you wanted your music to be presented as not just something that you were taught, but this is my voice through this instrument?
Right. I mean, that's still something that I think about and that I'm working on, and I think I'll always be working on it. But I really had to kind of train myself not to compare myself to other people, not to worry about what other people were thinking, unless I was asking for advice from a peer or from a mentor, but instead to just try to be honest in the music that I was making and believe that, if I'm being honest, then it will be received as such, and hopefully there will be a positive reaction. And if there's a negative reaction, who can blame me? I'm just being me. So I've been lucky to have positive reactions to my music and my playing, but I would say I'm especially sensitive about my composing, because I am not a trained, I don't have a degree in composition. I'm not, writing charts every day for a big band and whatever. So I really write based off of certain melodies or certain grooves or certain styles, and always sort of with this element of swing and creative improvisation, but maybe they're not always as straight ahead as, a blues or a rhythm changes or something. So I just, I continue to try to be confident in that and hope that people find something to latch onto in the music, whether it be the melody or a rhythm or a groove that makes them smile.
And you really have challenged yourself here lately.
Yes.
You just released the album Winds of Change, which I do want to get the story behind the name, because I think there are some puns in there.
Yes.
But these are your own compositions for the most part. And it's a wonderful sound. We've enjoyed featuring some of them on Simply Timeless. But you're working with a quintet in this particular case. So first, let's talk about the name, Winds of Change. As a saxophonist, obviously it's a wind instrument. I suppose it has something to do with it, but does that title represent the overall concept then of the album?
Yes, so the Positone producer, Mark Free, he sort of had this idea, because I was playing alto and soprano and alto flute, that it was sort of something, wind-centric. And I think it was also the idea that I was presenting my original music. I wasn't performing in anybody else's style or medium or whatever. And it's also kind of like a turning point for me, because I'm shifting now to try to do more things as a leader than as a side person, in terms of pushing the record and trying to book my band in different places. So sort of like starting a new chapter, or moving forward a little bit more. So I think the winds pun was definitely for the instruments, but also, like, you'll notice in the titles that there's breeze, there's calm, there's wisp after wisp. So there's also like this airy vibe to a lot of the titles, which is, I think, where winds came into play another time.
Our guest in studio is Alexis Tarantino, the acclaimed saxophonist from here in New York City. And you talk about some of these compositions and the overall concept. And this is your voice. Along with your ensemble, this is you. This is you putting your personality, your musicality on display. But you've had some influences, I'm sure, along the way as far as artists, as far as songs. What were some of those going into this album?
Well, I mean, the influences in terms of saxophone for me, my favorites have always been Phil Woods, Kenny Garrett, and Dick Oates, Cannonball Adderley. So while I might not sound like those people, and I hope that I don't, I hope that I sound like me, but I really, some of their kind of unique little tricks and things here and there, I like give a nod to them. And in terms of my writing, some of the songs, one of them, Square One, was inspired by the music of Kenny Wheeler. And then we have the tribute to Joe Beam. We have the Zingaro, the alto flute feature, which is a Joe Beam tune, which I absolutely love. And so I love that music. I love his compositions. But the rest of it is sort of just like expressing either a particular moment in time or a scenario, sort of something that I imagined, or a certain feeling. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe of those tunes.
And you've had to learn a lot in a very short period of time. You're 27, and many players, who are just starting to do what you're doing now, started much later in life. Maybe they didn't know what they wanted to do; they had to figure it out. But your name has become well respected by many. I know that you played last night at the Jazz Standard here in town. You've played with the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. You've played, one of your, I think, most respected gigs is with Sherrie Maricle and the DIVA Jazz Orchestra. And that's one area that I wanted to ask about. You said that you're transitioning now. This is a turning point for you from being just a player in the ensemble to being a leader. Now, as a female, that has not been tradition over the years in jazz. Someone put it to me the other day. They said, normally the guys play, and normally the lady sings. And even when I saw you at the Vanguard, someone made the joke. They said, "There's a girl here playing, and she's not the singer." So, what do you, and I realize this is a kind of a broad question, but looking at the current state of jazz music, what do you see your role as being in that community?
Well, I'm grateful to all of the people, male and female, that have helped to bring me up. I've had so many mentors. Sherrie is absolutely one of them. Wynton Marsalis is another one of them. And getting to know the guys in the Vanguard band, for instance, all of these people have been so helpful and so kind and generous to me. And I would like to think that it doesn't have to do with gender, right? I would like to believe that we all just want to be good people and help each other to learn and grow and move the music forward, because ultimately that's what it's about, is taking care of the music. Yes. But in terms of the way that I grew up, I was generally the only female in any given setting, which that can breed a very interesting mentality of maybe, there can only be one of us, only one female, in any given setting, which breeds sort of like a little competitive and negative vibe. And so I have a summer program that I run in Rockport, Massachusetts, and I really am proud to tell people that our numbers reflect, almost 50% male and female, which is super important to me. So not only do I want to be a role model just in general for young students coming up, as my mentors were for me, but I particularly hope to be a strong role model for young female musicians coming up. And I think it's really important just to be able to look at someone on stage and say, oh, I can see myself in her shoes. I think that's where we start to get those young musicians.
The same happened to you.
Exactly. So I feel very lucky in that respect, yeah.
And you're in a very unique position. You're not only an artist, performer, but you're also an educator. Mm-hmm. And the first time that I saw you, we didn't meet that occasion. It was at the Winter Jazz Gala for Jazz House Kids at Montclair, New Jersey.
Yes.
And you work with, I believe it's Melissa Walker, and also with Eba Morales, his wife Candace, Kelly Green, several other very talented musicians. And you were the special guest artist for this concert. And Candace had invited me, and I came. And I think I'd heard of you, but I did not know much about your work. And what you were there for, you were there to play, not as a featured performer necessarily, but you were playing alongside of these kids as young as 5, 6, 7 years old who were just learning their craft. Others were well on their way to becoming professional musicians. And you mentioned this idea of giving back. And there are so many who like to keep their talent and keep their skill right in here, So why is it important for you to give back? I mean, what is the driving force behind that for you, especially with regard to educating children about jazz music?
Well, I like to tell my students that, as important it is to be a great instrumentalist or vocalist, is as important as it is to be great on your instrument, it's more important to be a great person. So when I'm talking to parents and people, when I'm trying to get them enrolled in programs or my program or Jazz Lincoln Center's programs, when I'm talking to them, I'm always telling them about the benefits of jazz that go beyond music. So when we're working with young people, especially now when everyone's so synced up with their iPhones and their iPads and their video games, jazz and improvisation really highlights just the basic human qualities of respect, responsibility, empathy, taking responsibility for your actions, and time management, work ethic, dedication, focus on a particular craft. Not being so focused on immediate gratification, instant gratification. So all of these qualities are so helpful to us whether we play an instrument or not. And so that's why I find it so important, because whether these students become professional musicians or they become doctors or teachers or whatever, we just want people to know the benefits of music and realize, how important it is to have it in our lives. And so if I can help cultivate like the next generation of musicians and supporters of music, I just feel like that is taking care of the music.
And how do you hope that your own music will benefit others. You mentioned the gift of music and how it's beneficial to life. So when people listen to your recordings, what do you want them to take away from that?
I hope that they can feel some type of emotion in there. I mean, as much as I love to play fast and I love to play giant steps and all the chord changes and everything, I feel like the way that I compose is more emotion based and melody based. So I hope that my music just kind of puts a smile on people's face or makes them think, makes them feel a certain way, and that they didn't before. I just hope that it touches people in a way that is helpful to them.
What is it that you see yourself doing? I mean, it's not that you're ever going to get to a certain point, I hope, and just say, okay, that's enough, I've arrived.
Right.
I mean, what is it that you want to do as you move into your 30s and your 40s and so on?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm starting to try to transition into doing more band leader work. So I'd love to be able to kind of have my quartet touring a bit more and playing different venues and having an educational component to that as well. But I love the work that I get to do at Jazz at Lincoln Center with their education programs. I love the work that I get to do with my summer program, Rockport Jazz Workshop, and ultimately I'd love to have some type of a role as like the artistic director for a festival or something like that, where I can combine jazz programming with jazz education in a community that needs it.
One final thought. And this is a rather simple, it looks simple, but can often be a confusing question, but answer it as you want.
Sure.
And as a music educator, you might have been asked this already. Why music?
There's nothing better. I can't imagine my life without it. So I think that a lot of us probably couldn't, and even for those that disagree, there's music playing in the background here in the lobby as we speak, and if you take that away, things just feel kind of dead. So yeah, I think it truly helps us to think and to grow and to feel things and to connect with people, and if I can be a small part of making that happen for an audience member or a budding young musician, then I feel like I will have done my job.
Saxophonist Alexa Tarantino, our guest for In Studio from Simply Timeless. You can find more information about her music and tour schedule by visiting alexatarantino.com. Special thanks to the Hotel Belclair in Upper Manhattan for allowing us to use their space to record this interview. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.